Hi, everyone. Welcome to DocTalk. I am Dr. Knopf,
I'm Dr. Hannan. Welcome.
and today let's get into the holidays. It's the holiday season, Dr. Hannan. There's a lot of mixed feelings that sometimes come with this time. What do you normally hear from clients?
That it's the most time of the year, the most stress, the
The
most
most.
events, the most fun, the most feelings, the most family dynamics, the most pressure. There's a lot going on. How about from you?
I actually love that, and I'm gonna have to take that from now on. It instead of the it's or the holiday season, it's the most season. Got it. So yeah, I mean, things can feel fine, but really, are they fine? Especially if you're in recovery and now you're around parents, family members, siblings, uncles, aunts, everyone saying things that are totally triggering.
Yes, there is nothing quite like a holiday gathering to bring on the diet talk, relationship talk, politics, religion, everything that is tends to be uncomfortable and be like you're navigating like emotional landmines right and left, right?
Totally. So if anything, like this picture just sums it up for me. You're trying to put on the happy face. You're like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. And I'm even going to say this from my own perspective, not with lived experience, but someone who's fighting diet culture all the time. This is hard for me to hear when I'm
Yeah.
in family events and with friends of mine. I'm just like, y'all, don't you remember what I do every day? Come on. It's fine. It's totally fine. So what is
Yeah,
something
in
you
fact,
normally,
Dr.
oh, sorry,
Knopf,
go ahead.
well, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say something that I try to tell my clients to really normalize how difficult this is for them is that even I, as an eating disorder expert who I feel in such a good place with food in my body, I constantly have to navigate these kind of conversations with extended family, with friends, even people who know really well what I do. Some of them are like a quote unquote trained and know not to say this stuff about me, but sometimes they go underground with it. So it's just like, there's just an unease about it. And that even I in a like a really recovered position, even in an expert position, have to navigate this stress. And so I try to say that to normalize how difficult this is for clients, that when you're the one that's suffering and really triggered and really harmed by these kind of comments, it's doubly hard to navigate this stuff. And I just want to normalize and validate that this stuff is really, really hard, even in the best of circumstances.
That was so well said. What is your number one suggestion to people to help them prep for this, especially if they have lived experience knowing they've had complete disasters maybe in other holiday times? What is one of the first things you turn to?
Well, it's therapists' favorite buzzwords, which is
Oh, yeah.
boundaries. We're going to talk about boundaries. And one of my favorite
Yeah.
phrases about boundaries is that if people become upset by you setting boundaries, they benefited from you not having them in the first place. So
Mm,
that's a lot to navigate in one sentence, but people that get upset by you setting boundaries benefited from you not having them in the first place. So remember, if people do get upset or if this is tricky ground and tricky territory, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something right by you. And we support you in setting
mm,
boundaries. What are your favorite boundaries to talk
totally.
about?
Oh gosh. I think if anything, before getting into the specifics, it's more like why? Why do we need boundaries? Why is this the buzzword for all therapists? What is it actually for? And it really comes down to kind of like what you said, that people were benefiting from you not having a boundary before if they don't like it when you have one. It's really how do you protect yourself? How do you really honor what your needs, honor your safety and your sense of well-being and autonomy? How do you protect yourself from emotional or physical burnout? These are all reasons to have a boundary. And when we don't set boundaries, that's when we do experience more of a fallout with our own self-love and our own self-care.
Yes, and people
And
pleasing can be something that can really get in the way of having healthy relationships because if there's
yeah,
only room to please and not kind of stand up for yourself, not have a voice, not have an opinion, not say, "Ooh, that hurts me," and have those uncomfortable conversations that can actually increase reciprocity, respect, and dignity in the relationship, those relationships are the most likely to fracture. So people pleasing is
mhm,
is very easily thought of as a good thing, but that ultimately really deeply backfires in terms of relationship intimacy, honesty, and closeness.
The other thing I want to add, just as a word that's analogous to people pleasing, it's obedience. So, a lot
Mm.
of people, especially when we talk about transgenerational gatherings, really struggle with this concept of obedience, being the good girl, the good boy, the favorite child, whatever it might be. And so, I want to name that if you've not set boundaries before, you have not taken time to really delve into this on your own or with your care team, this can feel so uncomfortable when you are taking on a family system that previously relied on you being in that position of obedience or people pleasing. But it really is true, especially as everyone moves into adult realities and existences, and therefore, by default, is an adult in an adult relationship with other adults, that there is reciprocity. I love that you named that, that there is a two-way street in the relationship. It is not one way, nor should it have been before. But, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. We can't change everything from the past, but we can help advocate for um, better relationships with more integrity in the present.
Yeah,
So the
can I add
first
one
step,
thing to
oh,
that,
go ahead,
Dr. Knopf?
please.
So, um, with this, I really think a good parallel for exactly what you just said is eating disorder recovery. That your treatment team
Ah,
asks you to
yes.
do things with food and with movement, and like minimizing compulsive movement and making sure you're eating a meal plan that make you uncomfortable, that make your eating disorder uncomfortable. And the goal is that this is going to give you long-term health and wellness. Well, same is true with setting boundaries, emotional boundaries with family dynamics that aren't healthy, that they aren't serving the family. It does go for the long-term health and wellness of relationships and family dynamics in the best case scenario, and protects you from the toxicity of these short-term solutions, which is to be obedient, to go with the flow. Short-term solution is to restrict, to engage in eating disorder behaviors. They work quote unquote well in the short term because it appeases the anxiety in the moment. But in the long term, there's a big fracturing backfire. And we're looking out for you in the long term. That's why we're talking about boundaries.
Heck yeah. Thank you for that parallel. That was so beautifully said.
Thank
So,
you.
we wanted to give just like 3 steps to try to simplify this. I will say there's a lot of nuance in between. So, we'll try to cover as much as we can here and know that it is our full intention to have another webinar devoted just to boundary setting. So, the first part is identifying your needs. This really comes down to what emotions do you experience in certain scenarios, situations, relationships that make you feel uncomfortable and triggered, and can you really bring that awareness and be more specific even to what you're feeling. The more you can identify your emotions that you're trying to caretake, the better you can craft what needs to happen next. Because boundaries, right now, we've talked a lot about emotional boundaries, things like that, but boundaries really can be across multiple spheres. They can be physical, they can be material, they can be time. How much time will you really allow to be around a situation? They can even be sexual, they can be intellectual. There are
Financial.
multiple ways. Financial boundaries, thank you for adding that one. There are multiple categories for consideration, and we'll try to add links to at the end of this that you can find and resource on your own if you want to have some outside reading on your own. So once you identify what type of boundary you need, the next part is setting it up. And I want to actually lower the bar of expectations. Go slow. You're not going for perfection here. You're going for even a small degree of change can really impact you in the long term in a great way. So start slow, start small, start with the relationships that you value the most or mean the most to you, where you might be finding friction, or start with certain times of the year and you know you're going to have that family dinner at grandma's house and you know how it's gone in the past, and pick something of that experience that you previously had and find a boundary you want to have in place before you return to that environment.
Can I add something
um,
about that?
so yes,
I
please.
just think it's identifying your needs. I just want to say a little extra something about that, that in my work with a lot of clients who have had disordered eating and eating disorders, they struggle with a lot of difficulty in really understanding themselves because they've been referencing externally, right, about how much they should eat, what their body should look like, what other people think of them, what other people's opinions are of them. And so identifying your needs is something that's going to take time. I don't know anything more worthy of your time. It's similar to our
Mm.
long-term goal with eating disorder recovery, is that after you have stabilized your eating and are no longer engaging in eating behaviors, you're only referencing yourself for what sounds good to eat. And when you get into an intuitive framework. And the same is true with being intuitive with your needs and not having to explain or confess or apologize. And that takes time, it takes patience, it takes compassion, and it takes persistence, and it's worthy of your time and energy. And you'll get there. You'll get better and better at it.
I feel inspired right now. Thank you. That
You're
was
so right.
so well said. Oh my gosh. I just
You're
like,
so
I feel very much like, oh, I am confident and I can do anything now.
good.
Um,
That's all you
what do
need,
you
girl. I
think
got
too?
you.
That's all I need. I think too, to your point, not only in identifying needs, but then how do you find allies to help support you and help you discover your needs? And I think this is where, engaging with your treatment team or your closest supports, the people in your life that know you and love you unconditionally. I think having these conversations with them can be helpful in identifying your needs and then also identifying what boundaries might be helpful. It also gives you opportunity to test it out. Like, hey, how would you respond if I said something like this to you? What is
Yes.
a more normalized response versus I'm probably going to get yelled at later? Like, I want
Mm,
to know that there are other people that would have a different reply. What do you think? There's so much that you can play
yes.
out there, right?
Yes, it's so great to be able to practice when the stakes are lower so that you have an arsenal of skills in your back pocket for when the stakes get really high. Because the reality is, if we get triggered by our family, our amygdala flares up hot and we drop about
Mhm.
15 IQ points, our frontal lobe goes offline, and we just start behaving in more primal ways. It's just, it's like the human story. So having some skills in your back pocket so you can regulate. We're going to talk more about that in this webinar. And then just to normalize that everybody has a hard time. Everybody has to learn this. Everybody needs patience. And I want to say, too, one of my favorite things about family dynamics and boundaries is reminding yourself that you have the right to change your mind about any of this at any time with more information as it comes in, and to work with your team and a close friend and people that you trust to continue to revise what does and doesn't work for you.
Mm. Great reminder. We did want to give you some samples as far as what this could look like. So, the most obvious one, you have the request of no one talking about weight, diet, or eating behaviors, because obviously that's triggering if you're going through recovery and trying to recover. So, the boundary can look like, hey, I'm not really worried about that this year. Can we switch the subject? Or even say that's something I'm working through and I'd appreciate talking about something else. So, really trying to own the power to change the conversation that you're
Mhm.
in, knowing that you have the right to request that. And if someone doesn't want to honor that request, if they say, that's ridiculous, I'd rather keep talking about this, you can say, that's cool, I'll step away from this convo. You don't have to stay there talking to them if they're going to insist on talking about a subject that bothers you. The same thing can go with I think about this, unless maybe with family, it's a little harder to navigate with family, but it also is possible. Maybe there's a cousin or an aunt or an uncle that is really triggering in the past, maybe from a trauma perspective, the eating disorder recovery. There's several ways that this could show up. It's okay to name to your family members and friends that they value that relationship, but for your safety and well-being, you do not want to be around that individual. So to put it in a more positive language, if you will, if you invite so and so to the party or at your home, I will be leaving and spending time elsewhere until the party is over. And you can say, this is no disrespect to you. This is just my way of protecting myself.
Mhm.
I think people forget that you don't have to be around family just because they're family.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people have the maxim, blood is thicker than water. Well, sometimes not. If it's toxic, you're not going to take poison. So it's really important to know that you can name this and you can also be prepared to take action if it's not honored.
Yeah, it's deeply wise. It's deeply self-compassionate to honor your boundaries and have your own back and take care of yourself. I have clients struggle with conflict and what they view as conflict in setting boundaries. And so there really are like more gentle and more assertive ways to change the subject. I'm not really worried about this year. Could we change the subject? I really like that example. Another one that Evelyn Tribole, the author of Intuitive Eating, came up with is, I don't really think about food that way, or I don't really think about my body that way, and then just change the subject, right? Because it's like talking from an I statement, just like the one that Dr. Knopf had an example of, but it might feel a little bit less quote unquote assertive or conflict laden, and switching the subject, right? And then ask about a movie, or ask about like, what have you done to celebrate the holidays this year? Or have you, or do you feel ready for the holidays? Just anything that's not about food and body. But then just like number two suggests, if there are people that really are difficult, that really trigger you, that bring up a whole history of insults and slights and difficult dynamics, you really do have the right to remove yourself from that situation. Well said.
We went ahead too and added in here that there might be other topics that are triggering, and it's okay to name that these are triggering. It doesn't have to just be in the joke of, oh, no politics, no religion conversations in social settings or work parties. It can be much more obvious. Dating status too, like, hey, you're single, separated, divorced, married, it doesn't matter. No one should be asking you about that. And if it feels uncomfortable and it's not a topic you want to talk about, again, you can politely, confrontational way, change the subject. If
Yes.
anything, earlier we were brainstorming, some things could be dream vacations, dream hobbies. Like, I liked that a lot, Dr. Hannan, versus like, oh, new books or hobbies I might want to do, but like dream hobbies. Like,
Mhm.
I wish I could take on learning pottery on a pottery wheel.
I love it. My dream hobby is to volunteer at like animal rescue organizations
Ooh.
and help adopt animals and get them spayed and neutered. And like, that's a dream hobby of mine, is to volunteer to help as an animal advocate. I just don't, there aren't enough hours in the day, you know?
Well, maybe that should be something we try to hold each other accountable for at some point in our careers, that we actually do make time to do these
Yeah.
things that feel like they'll bring us joy.
I
But
love
you can also, talk about movies, concerts, music, things that people want to do. Again, another cool thing in today's day and age with Amazon, you can buy products that actually help with conversation starters. There's
it.
apps on the phone you could have that could be a total distraction and good tool to avoid these uncomfortable conversations.
And I heard a really great podcast interview where the interviewee, and I can't recall her name right off the top of my head, but one of the ways she helps make cultural gatherings meaningful and less stressful is to have some structure. So I love this idea that you had great products to help with conversations. Sometimes there's like a game, or if there's an activity attached, then you can kind of, I don't love the word control, but kind of manage the conversation in a way that doesn't let the person who has the loudest, most obnoxious voice in the room kind of take center stage. So having some thought about structure that will make you feel safe and at ease and have interactions that will be positive and helpful can be really a helpful strategy as well.
It's a roadmap, right? It's not control, but I like what you said there. I think it's okay to have some itinerary, right? We all kind
Yes.
of like knowing what to expect when we go somewhere.
And one
The
of my
other thing,
favorite tools
go
that I
ahead.
forgot to mention is
Yeah,
humor. If you have humor as one of the things in your arsenal, if someone makes like a really difficult political comment, like one of the things I like to say to deflect and diffuse tension is like, that we can't talk about politics at a holiday party. I gotta like hit the buzzer, and we gotta change this combo. Just kind of a gentle humor conversation or comment like that can sometimes helpfully redirect.
totally. And let's go ahead and talk about what happens if these don't land well, and what can
Mm.
people do to really prepare themselves.
If your
I think
frontal
the
lobe
first,
goes offline and your amygdala is at
yeah,
high alert.
yeah, like that's going to be really hard to survive and hard to feel comfortable and regain that safety. So I think not only prepping boundaries before you go into a situation that might be triggering, but also be prepped with what's in my toolbox. What do I have available to me? What have I practiced? What do I know is effective? And then also, what are some low-hanging fruit options? Like, general distraction or general leaving that vicinity. So we wanted to go ahead and throw up some options here. I mean, I guess it could be weird if you're at a holiday party to take, a corner and start journaling to release your feelings. But I also want to say, if that's what you
Why
feel
not?
drawn to do, do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
why not? Why
Why
not?
not?
Deep,
This
why
is
not?
your holiday too. You get to do whatever you want.
Exactly, exactly. Number one for me as a physician is always deep breathing. I actually like to tell people this is the best way to interact with your autonomic nervous system because you are manipulating the baroreceptors in your carotid arteries. Yep, I dropped some big science words there. When you focus on your breathing, you are breathing in more oxygen and breathing out more carbon dioxide, and that tells your brain that you can calm down and it lowers the amount of adrenaline or epinephrine that's released. So,
One
I
comment
have
about
team.
that. I
Yeah,
could not
go for
agree
it.
with you more. That is my number one go-to. Well, these first three are my favorite, but
Yeah.
one thing that when I was talking about like knowing yourself is for deep breathing to work really well for you, you've got to increase your awareness. So I
Mm,
like to tell people to start noticing when they're not in like the game, like the holiday party where Uncle so and so is yelling at you, like other situations where you start to get stressed out. So a really easy one for me is traffic. I'll get stressed in traffic, and I've trained myself to become aware of when I've gotten stressed. So then I call my attention to my breath. And in traffic, when I'm stressed, sometimes my breath gets really shallow or I'm holding my breath. And as we know, that is not good for your whole nervous system. And so then I've trained
nope.
myself to start deep breathing in traffic. So the fact that I do that in traffic is more likely to be something that I can call on at a holiday party when Uncle so and so is yelling at me. So awareness, compassion, patience, you can do it. You can get there. You can get better.
Practice. I like how you said practice. Actually, it really, like anything else as human beings, we have to practice a skill if we want it to be a useful skill later. So the five senses, you want to expand upon that one a bit too?
Oh, that's just such a good one, right? So I like to remind people that the experience of anxiety is usually because your mind is in the future or the past or fighting with your uncle. And so the five senses is just a great way to bring your attention to the present moment and not the stressors of the present moment, but what's going on right now. So breath is a great way to get to the present moment. And then with the five senses, what are five things I can touch? One thing I like to do too is just to feel my hand in a fist and feel my fingernails, not in a self-harm way, but just in a way of like grounding to feel my fingernails and my palms. So, what are five things I can touch? What are four things I can see? What are three things I can hear? What are two things I can smell? Is that the next one? I can't
Yeah.
remember. And then one thing you can taste, or one thing you can touch again, another thing you can touch. The
I
touch
actually
one
want to
is
put out a
really,
caveat. You don't have to remember to do the five, four, three, two, one in that order. Just take your five senses and start with one and go
yes,
five of those, four of the next,
yes.
etc. This does not have to be rigid.
No, no, no. Just get yourself into the present moment. Like an example I'll use in session is like, have you noticed how your feet feel inside your shoes right now? And, prior, your attention wasn't on your sensation in your feet. And when I ask you to call your attention to that, you can kind of notice how your socks feel. If there's, sorry if this is gross, sweatiness between your toes, or how your boots feel or your shoes feel on the ground, or how does your back feel on the chair where you're sitting. This is ways to call your attention to the present moment that just really help distract from and 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 manage the anxiety and the stress.
Totally. So, just a reminder, this list is not exhaustive. These are just some basic ones that we wanted to at least flag as everyone is prepping and thinking about how to prep. But with the time we have left, let's go ahead and talk about
Well,
that.
let's just mention number three, which is
Yeah.
our
Oh,
other
yeah.
favorite. If you're in a stressful situation, I always love the bathroom excuse, or like, oh, I'm having
Oh, yeah.
gastrointestinal distress. I got to go to the bathroom. It's a quick and easy escape. You can go do your breath and five senses in the bathroom. Or I say, like, if you can, run around the block just to like clear your head, or walk around the block really briskly if it's safe for you to do
As
so
you're able.
as you're able, and then decide if you want to or can reengage in the situation.
That's a very good reminder. Thank you. I think people, again, always need that reminder of you can leave. I don't know how many times
Yes.
you've said that now. You can leave.
can
You do
go.
not have to stay there.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about New Year's resolutions. You ready?
Yes.
Because people are usually, those are buzzwords in December. What is your New Year's resolution going to be? Everyone's posting things about it and saying, my goal, this goal, blah, 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 blah. What's your overall first point of advice when you're working with a client who may or may not be considering New Year's resolutions?
So New Year's resolutions can be triggering. A lot of my clientele have perfectionism. They see goals as really black and white, and if goals are helpful to you and this feels good to you to especially move in the direction of recovery and mental health and wellness, go bananas with goals. But something I try to work with my clients, especially with that perfectionism mindset, is to focus on values. And the way you know the difference between a value and a goal is something you can check off, and a goal is something you can check off. A value is like a direction on a compass, like north. You never arrive north, right? You just keep heading in that direction. So
Mhm.
something like relationships, having good relationships is something that you don't just like, and now I have good relationships. And so I'm done. I'm done. I don't have to do that anymore. Right. It's a value. Like, do I reach out to people? Do I connect with people? Do I make time with people? Do I remember things about people? That is how you know that you're setting like the rudder on your boat in that direction. So for a lot of people, I think a values-based New Year's resolution can be really helpful. And I like to use like a word or an intention, something like one year my intention was creativity, and I signed up to take some oil painting classes because I wanted to make myself do something that wasn't work, parenting, etc. Another one might be, connection or relationships or adventure or financial healthiness, right? You can kind of create a value that like moves you in a direction and you gently move towards that compass point. But if you like goals, go crazy. Goals are fine too, but just really check in with yourself and your treatment team if that can be kind of a compulsive black and white thinking and triggering for you.
Totally. I also like to add, it is perfectly okay to not have a New Year's resolution. It is
Exactly.
neither good nor bad to have one. It
Yeah.
is more important to remember that you need to do what's best for your health and your healing journey. So I love that you added, feel free to use again your treatment team or your close supports as soundboards when you're
Yes.
considering these things. And certainly the questions we've provided here are really good to just help make sure you are staying in a recovery focused mindset, that you're not being misguided by the structures and patterns of New Year's resolutions that might be steeped in anti-fatness and diet culture and really are more holistic. And I love how you described more about values-focused care. And if anything, specifically, I'd love to point out 5 anti-diet resolutions because why not, right? What are some
Absolutely.
things that honestly we could all probably use some improvement in? These are just 5 examples, but reassessing your use of social media. I mean,
That's the
yeah,
only diet
yeah.
we recommend is a social media diet.
We will prescribe that later.
Yeah.
I mean, knowing that you actually have a lot more say over your algorithm of your social media platforms can be really helpful. And you can actually search through the TikTok, Instagram, Facebook settings to actually learn how to limit what kind of content shows up, how to hide things that are harmful, and really cultivate a pro health, pro recovery um, milieu for yourself as you're engaging and trying to stay connected with the interpersonal relationships that matter. You actually can affect the space more than you might know. So I encourage everyone to look that up. Gratitude, the simple act of finding one thing to be thankful for, even in the midst of some terrible, intolerable negative emotion, can decrease that intensity even slightly, but enough where you can feel that relief. So having a gratitude practice, it doesn't have to be big, but like something you're thankful for. Like, I'm thankful my washer is getting fixed and it will start working again. Like, heck yeah. Sorry, I won't use curse words.
Well,
Heck
and I was
yeah,
going
I
to
can
say,
actually do laundry.
if gratitude does feel inaccessible in moments, it's okay. I like to shift that to just mindfulness, like which is what we talked about
Mm,
with 5 senses. Like focus on what's happening right now, what you feel right now, if gratitude feels inaccessible. But if gratitude is accessible, that can be a really powerful practice.
totally. Writing in a journal, I'll say not for everyone. I don't know how many times I've tried to commit to writing in a journal more. I now lament sometimes not doing it because I've already started forgetting moments of my life that I wish I had documented. But writing in a journal is a cool thing to commit to. Starting a new hobby, again, maybe Dr. Hannan will start volunteering in animal shelters very soon. But I think the biggest one that we want to talk before we end is engaging in self-care habits. And what does that mean to you, Dr. Hannan?
Oh my gosh, I love this because I think the theme that we've been talking about this whole time is about really knowing and understanding yourself, right? When it comes to boundaries, it's understanding yourself. When it comes to practicing coping skills, whether or not you create a resolution that's goal based, whether it's value based or both, or no resolution at all, self care is about self awareness and self knowledge. And you can, you're on a journey to continue to deeply know yourself, become yourself, understand yourself. Your team will help with this too, but some of my very favorite self-care habits are the ones that you listed with social media. That's a really important one. I love hot water. I love like taking a bath or a shower or getting in the hot tub if I have the opportunity to do something that fun. um, I love stretching and deep breathing, like we've already talked about. And then my most powerful self care habit is really protecting my rest, rejuvenation, and recovery.
Yeah, if anything, we are not instructed or taught how to rest, but we mean
Mm-hmm.
really rest, like unplug, find alone time too. It doesn't matter if you're extroverted or introverted, everyone needs alone time. So, really knowing that you might benefit from having that included in your life on a more regular cadence, that's a wonderful thing to commit to in the new year. So, with
Oh, and I want
that,
to add
thank
one
you.
more.
Oh,
Play. Play
yeah.
can be a really fun self care.
Play!
Play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
All right.
So with that, thank you for joining us. Happy holidays. We'll see you at our next webinar.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye. Good luck.